Running Sentences presents A Cold, Cold War. Part 1. Hot Potato. A game of hot potato begins between spy agencies when a Soviet scientist gets to go on vacation to Prague. Copyright 2021. Michael Honnery. All rights reserved. This is a work of fiction. Any characters, any names, places, or incidences that happen within this story are of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual events that have happened is purely coincidental. The author would also like to apologize in advance for any mispronunciations of names, characters, and places, as he's only good with English, and even that is a bit of a struggle most of the time. Standing on the catwalk above the missiles being assembled, Evgeny Kucherov watched his group of scientists. They were pushing and pulling at two segments of what would be a housing element, but it wasn't going together easily. Evgeny sighed at the sight. It was always this way. They never listened to his ideas or plans, always insisted that the scientists knew the way forward and not some yokel from a local college. The clinking clap of footsteps on the catwalk drew his attention away as Fedorov rushed up. "Evgeny, what are you doing here?" "My work. What else would I be doing?" "The boss, Mikhail, has called for you from his office. He wanted to see you right away." Evgeny straightened up surprised and then scurried off down the catwalk of the main building. It was not going to be a short journey. It took at least 10 minutes of fast walking across the plant to get to the main office building. Meanwhile, Mikhail sat in his office smoking a cigarette and listening to the phone receiver that he loosely held to his ear, trying to avoid the squawking noise that came out of it. "What is your plans for Troff?" "The plan is to let those authorized to deal with such situations to deal with them. I'm having him go on vacation so that they can do their work." "Good. As soon as the matter is settled and you're sure that he is going there, let the right people know that he is going there." The line went dead and Mikhail idly slid the phone back into its holder. He sat back in his stiff chair with a sigh. "Someone is always ordering me around. Why can't they just ask nicely for once?" He sat up and reached for the switch on his desk, which would call his secretary and flicked it on. "Has Evgeny Kucherov shown up yet?" "Just a minute ago. He came in. Shall I send him in?" Yes, please do, secretary." As he released the switch, the door opened and in walked Evgeny. The man, thin and reedy, slipped past the door and closed it. He stood there looking rather tentative, and Mikhail offered another sigh and grabbed a folder off of his desk as he opened it. "Oh, now, Evgeny Kucherov, do you know why I've called you in today?" No, I have no idea what's going on. Did I do something that requires attention?" "Yes, you did something that caught the attention of your superiors. Don't ask me how or why, they didn't tell me, but it came to their attention that you haven't had a holiday in a while." "I what?" "A holiday. You know, the thing where you go off on some nice place and pretend you both like and dislike it at the same time. You're being given one of those. You get to choose the location from a friendly country to ours." Thank you. This is generous of the bosses." "Yes, it is. Choose wisely from countries that have like-minded government systems. And by that I mean you have a choice between Prague. I choose Prague." "Are you sure? You haven't heard the other choices." I have friends there, and it will be nice, I think, this time of year to go there. Am I to go right now, or soon, or?" "It has been organized that the trip should take place as soon as the next few days. If you can work that out. We have a lot of people to get to on these vacations, and we can't have you all out at once." "Oh, yes, sir. I will head out as soon as you ask me to. Is it okay if I take the rest of the day off to go organize that?" "Fine by me." Evgeny, without waiting for permission to leave, bolted out of the room, and Mikhail once again sat back in his stiff chair, shaking his head as he reached for his phone once again. Fool isn't even good at his job. A few days later, Evgeny stood next to the door to leave his home. His suitcase was in hand, but his wife stood in the way. He tried his best to kiss his wife to get her to move, but she stood firm. "Evgeny Kucherov, why are you going to Prague of all places?" "My department has organized a meeting of the minds, a learning lesson, a thing." "But why Prague? And why so soon?" "I don't know why they chose Prague. I do know that they won't be happy if I miss my flight. Government has insisted that I go, so I must go." Evgeny, as gently as he can, moves his wife away from the front door of their house, and she was pouting and crossed her arms, seriously displeased with him as he opened the door and escaped. The flight from Izhvik, near his home in Vostnik, was a smooth and uneventful event that dropped him gently in the Prague airport. Even going through customs was easy, with a flash of his passport on the wave through. Evgeny found himself grinning at his luck as he collected his bag and headed outside to find a taxi. He soon found one of those with an amiable enough cab driver. "Driver, please take me to the hotels wherever they are." "Do you have a particular one you're going to, sir?" "Oh, no, I like to look at my options before I decide on which is to be my hotel." With a shrug, the cab driver turned and got into his car in one motion. They were soon puttering down through the city, headed towards the hotel district, which they soon arrived in this odd selection of hotels for one to stay at. The driver drove past them and then came to a stop. Evgeny paid the driver and got out, walking the street with his suitcase, looking at each hotel before coming to a stop in front of a fancy but simple one. It merely had the words "Hotel" highlighted by lights above the front door. Nodding to himself, Evgeny marched in. He found himself at the front desk a few short seconds later, and looking at a concierge, looked back blankly. Do you speak Russian?" "Yeah, I speak it. I barely read it. What can I help you with, sir?" "I'm looking for a friend of mine, a Misha Ivanov." "Let me look in my book to see if we have a person here by that name." The concierge turned to his book of hotel residents and briskly looked through a few pages. Satisfied that he had an answer, he looked up. "Yes, we happen to have someone by that name here. Would you like me to ring up to them, to make sure it is the right person?" "No, this is a surprise visit. If you could just give me the level that Misha is staying on and the room number as well." The concierge shrugged. "Floor 3, room 304. Evgeny was giddy with this information, soon grabbed up his suitcase and headed for the stairs. He was bounding up them on his way towards the 3rd floor as quickly as he could go. When he got to the 3rd floor, Evgeny found himself marching down the hallway with suitcase in hand, carefully looking at each door for the number he wanted. He passed several rooms on his way to find 304, and prepared to knock on it. However, it opened suddenly, and a barely dressed Misha appeared in the doorway looking concerned, her willowy figure contrasted by her face, hardened by hardships. "Evgeny, what are you doing here? Why didn't you tell me you were coming? Is your wife with you today, or is it just you alone?" "It's just me. I thought I'd surprise you. Isn't it lovely that I got time away from work to see you?" "Of course it is lovely that you've come to me. I'm just surprised, that is all. How did you find me?" "Hard work. I've been searching high and low since you vanished from Moscow. But I found you, and now we can spend some quality time together." She reached out gently and touched his face, caressing it. "Evgeny, I'm on a job here, but I can make some time for you, if that is okay. Did you get a hotel room?" I figured I'd stay with you." "Oh, no, that cannot happen. You can stay for the night, of course, but you need to find your own place so that we can meet privately." "Wonderful!" Misha stood aside to let Evgeny in, and he happily marched in. She, however, crept a bit out into the hallway and looked down both ends to make sure that they were alone, then carefully stepped back inside her room. Across town at the Soviet consulate office, Sergei Petrov had just gotten off the phone, his face coloring as he hangs the phone up. The day had gone from okay to bad, with requests from officials coming in who didn't want to hear anything but yes, sir. These orders always had a tendency to ignore that there was another government standing in the way, and they didn't take kindly to be ordering around by someone else. With a shake of his head, he got up from his desk and locked eyes with the office door of his boss. The hopes that he was still inside were slim but hopeful. He grabbed a folder off his desk and headed over towards it. When he arrived, he knocked on the door to Vasily's office and opened the door to peek in. Vasily sat at his desk, a drink in his hand, looking rather downcast at some report spread across his desk. Sergei quietly entered the office and came to a standstill in front of his boss's desk. After a few seconds of studying the papers, Vasily looked up. "Is this important?" "A file on our friend Evgeny Kucherov, who's come to town." "Friend? Huh. That sounds like someone doesn't like him. Why do we care?" "He's a rocket scientist, sir, and there are rumors of a defection." "He came to Prague to defect? There are plenty of places that are much better suited for such things." Sergei shrugged and handed over Evgeny's files, which Vasily snatched away out of his hand and gave a brief glance over. Maybe, sir, it's the only place he felt safe doing such things?" Vasily looked up again. "Yes, maybe. And have we talked to his superiors about this yet?" "I did get a call from a Mikhail over at the SSSR who confirmed that there were rumors there as well. Is there anything you want to do about him, or what shall we do?" I think this calls for a little creativity, since I'm guessing we don't want to get our hands dirty and caught. I say we hand him over." "What? I don't think I understand what you're trying to do, Vasily." "I got a call from Moscow, their Special Operations Bureau, who pointed out that a rocket scientist might suddenly appear on our doorstep. We should be kind and get rid of the problem, we could call it a problem instead, through humanitarian means, and, just not get our hands too involved in it. So we're just going to hand him over to somebody who wants him? But he's not wanted by anyone. So your job will be to keep an eye on him and figure out how to get him to our friends on the other side, and quickly." Vasily offered the folder on Evgeny back to Sergei, who took it and was waved away by his boss. Sergei, however, was still a little bit confused as to what he was going to do about this as he backed out of the office. Not far away, in another office building, designed to look like it was just an office, hurried Henry Cart. He was the U.S. agent in charge of most operations of a secretive, clandestine nature. He nor his subordinates were officially there, but the Soviet, British, and of course the Czech all knew that they were there but never did anything about one another. Henry wandered his way through a maze of desks to find his way to Frank Gordon's desk and came to a stop beside it. Frank had a file open in front of him and looked very concerned. Henry peeked at the name on the file. Evgeny Kucherov. "What's going on here, Frank?" A Soviet rocket scientist has come to Prague, and we suspect that he wants to cross over, but we're not sure. I don't know, it seems weird. When's this person showing up, and would he be a good person to bring over, Frank?" "He's already here at a hotel, from what our sources tell me, and they also told me that he's nothing more than a middle manager. He works in the rocket housing construction, which we already know all about." "Not exactly worth our time, then." "No. What do you want me to do about him, though?" "It's not really worth the time or the effort." Yeah, no, not worth the effort on our part, but I think the British might need somebody like him. They seem to like they could use some good things going their way. Why wouldn't we just tell the British about him and then go on our merry way? We can't really do that, though. the Soviets might suspect that we know something, and if they suspect we know something, they're going to start looking for spies, and they start looking for spies, then our spy might be found, and it's just, yeah. I think most of that went over my head, sir. I don't Look, it's like this. This is a Soviet fishing expedition with a Russian scientist as the bait. It's to see if we have people telling us what's going on in their country. Just to make sure that they don't know that we know that this guy isn't worth it. We kind of have to go after him. Do you get it? And even if you don't, go find the guy. Henry was already moving away, and Frank could merely offer a shake of his head and went back to studying the papers in his file. When the next morning rolled around, and true to his word, Evgeny had departed Misha's hotel room in the morning to search out his own. He'd found a nice little place not far away, and he was in the lobby at the concierge desk trying to check in. Across the lobby, however, on the convenience phone, was Timothy Miller keeping an eye on the Soviet scientist while talking to his boss. Yep, the potential friend is in my sight. Good, then the recent tip from our informant was right. This bodes well for our project to get in motion. While that's going on, you can grab the friend and do so without making our other friends and other governments wise to what's going on, if you please. Right now? Grab him? No, not right now. He's being watched probably at the second, and that would raise suspicion. I just told you not to do that. We don't want to upset people. You'll need to find your chance and just wait for now, and keep an eye out. We don't want to be discovered. With that, the conversation was over, and his boss, Chuck Sinclair, hung up the phone. With nothing else to do, Timothy hung up the phone on his end and watched as Evgeny finished checking in and headed over to the elevators to go to his hotel room. The Soviet scientist soon disappeared. This left Timothy with nothing to do, and so he went about to find a place to sit and wait for the man to come back down. Upstairs, Evgeny walked into his simple hotel room, and looking at the bed and then the telephone on the window. There wasn't much here to distract him from not being with Misha, which caused him to pout, unable to contain his boredom any further and desperate for something to do and distract himself with. He sat down on the bed and picked up the phone to call the front desk. Yes, is this the front desk? How might we be of service? Room 209? I was wondering what there is to do in the city, something along the lines of engineering. I'm good with understanding engineering, other things not so much. I see. Well, you may wish to visit the National Technical Museum in the Letna section of the city. If you come down to the desk, I can give you a map and directions to the area. Yes, that sounds amazing. I will be right down in just a few seconds. In his eagerness and happiness, Evgeny slammed the phone down into its receiver and popped up from the bed. A good day. No wife to deal with, a mistress who loves me and wants me to improve my mind. Life is looking up. He hurried out of the room, pleased with himself. An hour or two later, he found himself wandering from exhibit to exhibit in the National Technical Museum, looking at what they had to offer. The pieces, while nice to look at, didn't connect with him. He passed his time walking back and forth, trying to see something interesting. The exhibits, however, did manage to attract all of his attention, or else he would have noticed that he was being followed. The trio of Sergei, Timothy, and Frank were all walking behind him and examining exhibits as well, all while trying to blend in. But the three had all noticed one another, and they were pretending that they hadn't. It didn't help that they kept looking over at what Evgeny was doing. This routine carried on for about another hour until Evgeny was bored and finally headed out of the museum. As he managed to exit and started to walk across the parking lot, Sergei emerged first from the museum as well and was in hot pursuit. Timothy and Frank struggled to get out of one another's way as they also exited the building in pursuit of Evgeny. Using this advantage, Sergei had managed to catch up to Evgeny and grabbed a hold of his arm. Evgeny Kucherov, you need to come with me right away. You're in grave danger. What? Who are you? I'm Alexei Vector of the USSR consulate here in Prague. We have reason to believe your life might be in danger. What am I in danger from, sir? Alexei or Victor or... Do you see those two bumbling fools behind us? Don't look too hard. Evgeny attempted to look backwards, but Sergei grasped his arm tightly and pulled him forward. Don't look now or they'll know that we're on to them. They'd gotten as far as the sidewalk next to the road as a van suddenly pulled up in front of them. The side door of the van opened, allowing Sergei to push Evgeny inside and then following him in. The van spins its tires as the door is closing and taking off down the road. Two other vans rolled up to the museum as Timothy and Frank have finally managed to clear the hurdle of the front door and each other and rushed to their respective ones. Timothy's British van was behind the US van, but Timothy got into his first and they took off after Evgeny. Frank's van was slow to get moving because of a backfire, but it soon took off after, once it could. Down the road, the van carrying Evgeny and Sergei threaded its way through the traffic heading for a safe house. The two other vans were following at a distance, trying just to keep up. The driver of the vans turned to Sergei and jerked his head back to say something was behind them. Boss? Just drive to the safe house, driver. Evgeny was trying to get comfortable in the bare back seats of the van that didn't really actually have any back seats. What's going on? Nothing, Mr. Kucherov. You'll soon be safe and sound from any potential threats. Threats? I'm being threatened? By who? I have no enemies. I have plenty of friends, though. Mr. Kucherov, it will all be explained when we get to the safe house. For now, though, it's best to shut up. Evgeny glanced about the van's cabin in search of help of understanding. However, the only other things inside the back were two bulky men he'd been sat who were holding him carefully so that he didn't rattle to death. The van carrying them pulled into the parking lot next to an apartment building that sat on the outskirts of the city. Before the van had even managed to come to a stop, the side door had opened and out piled Sergei, followed by Evgeny and his two guards. They hurried over to the front door and entered the building, and in the background the van with Agent Timothy came to a stop, parking on the side of the road, watching the apartment. Frank's van, however, cruised past the apartment, coming to a stop down the road, closer to a telephone booth. Inside, Evgeny found himself rushed into a plain apartment room, followed by the guard and Sergei. The place was even plainer than plain, with a simple wooden table and chairs meant to give a homely feel. The simplicity of the place, however, made it feel barren, aside from the portrait of Leonid Bruznov hanging rather lopsidedly on the wall. Evgeny wandered about the room trying to find something of interest, but there was nothing aside from the furniture. He turned to face Mr. Sergei, or Alexei as he'd called himself. "All right, Mr. Alexei Victor, what am I doing here?" Sergei takes a second to remember that that's the name he'd given to Evgeny and offered a simple smile. He walked over to him and clapped him on the shoulder. "It's simple. We have reason to believe that certain forces within the city that shouldn't be here are after you, but we cannot act against them as we currently don't have enough evidence." Me. They want me. Yes, you see, they have ways of finding out who you are and what you do. These British and American folks know that you're a valuable, valuable Soviet scientist who works on rockets and missiles. And what American or British agent wouldn't want to bring that home to show off to? We, therefore, must protect our assets. Again, me? Yes, you. Now, all you have to do is stay here. I'll assign some guards to guard your door, and you'll be safe and we'll soon be on a plane back home. What if what if I don't want to go home? I just got here. I'm supposed to be on vacation. Don't be silly. Of course you wish to go home. Unless, of course, by wanting to stay here, you're saying that you want to defect. Evgeny froze up and rapidly shook his head no. Sergei and returned this with a nod of approval and then decided to take a lap about the room to make sure it was safe. He stopped at the window with the fire escape peering out to see what there was to be seen. It, however, barely provided a view of an alleyway that sat next to it. Satisfied, Sergei and his guards headed for the door, leaving Evgeny to sit down in one of the lonely wooden chairs. Outside of the little safe-house apartment, Sergei was stopped by the guards, who stood near the doorway. He looked at them crossly. "What do you two think you're doing?" Guarding the room like you said, sir. No. You standing in front of the door will make it obvious that something is going on of importance in that room. I have better ways of keeping an eye on the matter. Now, come on, before our friends figure out what's going on. The group stomped off down the hallway and headed for the stairs so that they could leave. They headed back to their van, which, once they were safely inside of, took off down the road, headed back the way it came. Frank, near the telephone booth, jumped out of his van and headed over to the phone booth to get inside. Timothy, having had the same idea, came bounding down the sidewalk towards the phone booth, but Frank was already inside. Mr. Cart, boss, I have the location of where our friend has been dropped off at, though the guards have come and left. I suspect that something is up. Still, we have to act. Where are you? That's one of the things. It's a bit complicated with where I am. By the way, are our other friends nearby as well? The ones with the stiff upper lips and never surrender attitude because it's doomed anyway, so just get on with it? Yes, they're right outside, actually. Yes, well, make sure they wind up with our friend. And the address? Yes. You know the place that's considered both hostile and not because we all like to have a place there? No, I don't. Frank rolled his eyes a little disappointed and then a little happy that things weren't so clear. Anyone listening would probably be confused. Our favorite spot. We nicknamed it H. Oh, right, that one. Oh, yeah, do you need some people to come down to help you evict the unwanted company? Yes, please. Send them as quick as I can. Right, I'll look up the location and see what help I can send your way to that particular area. I think we can expect something in 30, maybe 40 minutes. It's going to be a wait. The line went dead and Frank hung up the phone on his end. He turned and opened the hatch door to get out of the booth, and Timothy was standing in the way, trying to get in. They shuffled about one another, doing their best not to look at one another or say anything. Timothy got in, and Frank headed back towards his van. Timothy slid the door shut quickly and turned to the phone, getting it and dialing a number as quickly as he could. Boss, we've got a situation. I need reinforcements down. Who are you trying to reach? Is this the operating center? Where's the boss? It is, and please remember that we need to be careful with names and information. Now, if I can help you with something... There's a small compromise situation and I need some fast people at the side-by-side home. Is there anything else? No, just get them here on the double. They'll be at your location in a few minutes. Instead of waiting around to hear if the office operating center had any important things to tell him, Timothy hung up the phone and was out of the phone booth in a flash, heading towards his van to wait. He didn't, however, get into his van outside, and it would take another 20 minutes for another car to come down the quiet road. The vehicle came barreling in and came to a screeching halt next to Timothy's van with a group of professional-looking, swarthy men stepping out, all of them looking quite prim and proper. They offered a salute to Timothy, who returned it with an equally crisp salute of his own. What are your orders, sir? Men, we have a dangerous situation in front of us. A potential defector has been detected and hidden away in that safe house. Let's go get him. Timothy and his new entourage charged up the sidewalk to the front door of the apartment building. Upon entering this building, the group came to a screeching stop. The row of mailboxes in front of them had caused them to come to this stop, and Timothy now found himself glancing over the names on mailbox looking for something that would give him a sign of where the defector might be hidden. His fingers passed by the name of Washington Lincoln and the one that he was more familiar with, Winston Shakespeare. He stopped looking a second later. Aha! Apartment 3C. He triumphantly tapped the placard with the name Vladimir Rasputin. Then, without waiting for anything else, he hurried over to the stairs, the only way to get up and down in this old apartment building. Frank, having gotten back into his van, sat impatiently on the passenger side and was tapping his foot on the floor as he and the driver waited for backup. Should we do something, sir? I mean, the British are going in to steal our potential defector. British can have him for all I care. Upper management has told me to make sure that we don't pick him up. To that end, if we do somehow wind up with a loose defector in our hands, we have to find a way to make sure he gets into the British or back to the Soviets without making it look like us. Our reason for being here is just to make sure that it isn't our problem. Or maybe that he just stays out there all on his own, and that we keep appearing that we're trying to get him. I don't think it's politics. Don't think about how many hoops we have to jump through to please our masters. They fall silent with only Frank's foot tapping to keep them company while they continue their wait. Inside the apartment, Evgeny, feeling a bit safe but also very cautious, moved about the living room to a single-cot bedroom. This room, like the living room, was sparsely and sparingly furnished with everything kept very simple. It contained a metal cot with a thin mattress and a wooden nightstand with a small light standing on top of the space over the stand. He sighed at the sight and looked over at another door which he guessed was to a bathroom, but didn't head over to it to check out for fear of further disappointment. The whole thing was getting him down, so he went back to the living room, hoping that the phone would appear, since that would let him call Misha, but there was nothing there. He stumbled over to the chair nearby that he'd left and sat down heavily again. Timothy and his group of SAS-looking mercenaries stood outside the door to 2C. "This is the place, men. Prepare for a fight." The door for the apartment across the way, 4C, creaked open only to snap shut by one of the mercenaries. Timothy glanced over and then back at the important door, knocking fast and furiously. When there was no immediate response, he stepped aside and one of his mercenaries kicked the door in, and then went in themselves. Frank was now outside by the sidewalk by his van, waiting for his reinforcements to show up. He'd left the van after having warned the patience of the driver to a bare minimum with his foot tapping. His foot was still tapping away, and it was even beginning to annoy himself, so he pulled out a cigarette to try and calm himself down. A car puttered its way down the street with a man looking directly at Frank and then pointing at him. The car came to a stop and a group of 4 big burly guys, who looked like they'd just come from drinking one too many beers, piled out. One of them went to the back of the car, popping open the trunk, and pulled out a bag. The group walked over to Frank, who still had yet to light a cigarette and was watching them carefully as the cigarette was dangling from his mouth. The one carrying the bag tossed it over to him, and Frank caught it and unzipped it to look inside. He discovered that it contained a load of grenades inside. "Frank Gordon, we're your backup." "Smoke grenades?" "Yes, sir. What do you need to do?" "Follow me and you'll see. We're about to cause some madness." Frank slung the bag over his shoulder and headed straight for the apartment building entrance with a group of reinforcements following him. Timothy had followed his SAS men into the apartment as a shocked Evgeny at first stood up and then tried to make a break for the bedroom. The mercenaries, however, rushed over and cut him off. They soon had Evgeny corralled and plopped back into the chair that he'd been sitting in. Timothy had taken to marching about the room and the chair, his head held high until he came to a stop in front of the man and stared at him. "Do you, Mr. Evgeny Kucherov, know who we are?" "Should I?" And to answer your question, no, I don't. "We are your saviors. You will soon be free from your government and life of dreary hardships. No more putting together the same old pieces of missiles in the hopes that your employer recognizes your hard work. No, it will be sunshine for you from now on." England doesn't have sunshine, Mr. British man. It does occasionally have some spots that aren't all rain and dreariness. All of our citizens aren't all soaked to the bone from the constant drizzle of rain. There is some sun, but it isn't England that you will be going to. Evgeny glared at him from the chair as Timothy took to walking around again. Out in the hallway, Frank and his group had arrived at the level which Evgeny's safe house apartment room was located. They'd carefully crept along the hallway until they found the room with the door missing and quite a loud British voice declaring things to be right. Frank didn't bother to peek in, knowing that it was the room he was after. Instead, he backed up and away from the situation, handing out smoke grenades to each of his men. "Do exactly as I do. We're going over to that open door and toss the smoke in. After that, well, we shall see what happens." Frank hurried back over to the open door and got ready to pop the pin on his grenade. One of his group, however, had bounded past him and lobbed one that they had in. Frank dropped his, which caused the pin to detach, and he grabbed a hold of the man who'd thrown his grenade in and made an effort to kick in his grenade as he pulled back the man. The other three also followed suit, drop-kicking their grenades in. "Everybody get back downstairs and get out of here!" The 4 men who had come to help him dashed off back the way they came. Frank, however, held back as the grenades began to go off. Shouts and cries came from the room, but he didn't go in as smoke began pouring. The British are up to something, but for now the job, I think, is done. He then hurried back down the hallway. End of part 1. Thank you for listening.